The first misunderstanding happened on a Thursday. The Xilari delegation had landed on Earth 2 weeks prior and, by most accounts, things were going well. There had been a few stumbles. One ambassador fainted upon discovering salsa, but overall, the diplomatic exchange was stable. That is, until the incident in the garden behind the embassy building in Northern California. Harlan Zuckerman, a 37-year-old liaison from the U.S. Department of Extraterrestrial Relations, had stepped out for his usual post-lunch walk with his dog, Moose. Moose was a lumbering golden retriever with a coat like melted caramel and the emotional intelligence of a damp sponge. He was harmless, adored belly rubs, and once barked at a shrub for 40 minutes because it moved in the wind. Harlan had Moose on a leash, humming a song he didn't quite know the words to when the Xilari science envoy, Drick, rounded the corner of the building. Drick was 8 feet tall, all sinew and scale, with a long neck that turned unnervingly slow. Its eyes, large and glassy, locked onto Moose instantly. The dog's ears perked. "Who's that?" Harlan said, mostly to Moose. Drick had frozen mid-step. Moose, as he did with every new person, bounded forward on the leash with a joyous bark, tongue lolling, tail wagging like a helicopter blade. Harlan tried to hold him back, but Moose had the strength of a small horse and the sense of a lost balloon. Drick let out a shriek, a shrill, layered sound like wet glass grinding against stone, and hurled its translation device onto the grass. "Wait! Hold on!" Harlan called out, stumbling after Moose. Drick had already stumbled backward, tripped over a garden bench, and fallen with a heavy crash into a bed of hydrangeas. Moose, delighted by new friends and unaware of intergalactic etiquette, pounced onto Drick's chest and began licking its face enthusiastically. "No, Moose. Off. Get off." Harlan reached them, panting, and dragged the dog away. Drick scuttled backward, limbs flailing like a crab caught in a net. Its chest heaved, eyes wild. Harlan knelt beside it. "Are you okay? You're not hurt, right?" Drick pointed a trembling finger at Moose. It lunged. The creature attacked. No, he was just saying hi. He's friendly, see?" Harlan reached down and scratched behind Moose's ears, who wagged his tail and rolled onto his back. Drick's voice jittered. "That is a predatory display." It exposed its vulnerable abdomen as bait. Classic lure tactic. Harlan blinked. "No, that's just. He wants belly rubs." A security team had arrived by then, weapons holstered but hands near them. Drick was helped to its feet, still trembling. The incident was logged as hostile encounter with native beast. An emergency session was called at the local embassy hall that evening. Harlan sat across from Drick, who now wore a protective exosuit with reinforced plating. The alien kept glancing at the door where Moose had last been seen. "I'm telling you," Harlan said, "he's just a dog. A domesticated animal. People keep them as pets. They're loyal, friendly, and sometimes eat socks." Drick's eyes narrowed. "You have weaponized companionship." "No. He's not weaponized. He's just dumb, honestly." Harlan rubbed his temples. "He once got scared of his own reflection in a puddle." Drick tapped a clawed finger against the table. "He pursued me with open jaws. He was smiling. That is not how smiling works." After an hour of back and forth, the council agreed to a demonstration. Harlan would bring Moose, under controlled conditions, to the embassy's open atrium the next day. The Xilari would observe from behind a reinforced barrier. "They're going to think I'm parading a bloodthirsty creature," Harlan muttered to himself as he drove home, Moose panting happily in the back seat, unaware he had sparked an interstellar diplomatic incident. The next morning, Harlan prepped Moose with a bath, a brushing, and a fresh green bandana. He brought his favorite tennis ball and a bag of liver treats. Moose, as always, was just happy to be involved. Inside the atrium, a semicircle of Xilari scientists, envoys, and guards stood behind a transparent shield. Harlan walked Moose into the center. "Okay, buddy," he whispered. "Let's show them what a good boy looks like." He tossed the ball. Moose took off in a gallop, ears flapping, legs thudding like sacks of potatoes. He caught the ball mid-bounce, skidded slightly, then trotted back and dropped it at Harlan's feet. A few of the aliens flinched. Harlan fed him a treat. "Good boy." Drick stepped forward, holding a scanning device the size of a toaster. It beeped rapidly. His heart rate rises when running, Drick observed. Adrenaline floods his system. He is preparing for attack. "No, that's just exercise." Drick's translator buzzed. Then he consumes flesh afterward. Their liver treats. From cows. Not a threat to you. Your species feeds its beasts the organs of other species? Harlan sighed. Look, we eat cows too, okay? It's complicated. Drick took a step closer. I wish to attempt contact. You sure? I must understand this anomaly. Harlan nodded. Moose, sit. The dog obeyed. Drick approached slowly, trembling. Moose tilted his head, then licked Drick's hand gently. Drick stiffened. It applied mucus to my skin. That's affection. Drick stared at the wet spot. It is confusing. I know. Over the next week, Moose became an unlikely star. The incident, now dubbed the Licking Beast Scare, had gone viral across human-Xilari news feeds. Harlan spent hours giving interviews, always with Moose beside him, tail wagging. But not everyone was convinced. A group of Xilari enforcers led by a stern commander named Vel insisted on further testing. The animal must be put through stress simulations. We must know what triggers aggression. Harlan frowned. He's not a lab rat. He is a potential threat. Reluctantly, Harlan agreed to a limited set of tests, nothing painful or cruel, but it quickly went off the rails. The first test involved loud noises. Moose yawned and curled up in a corner. The second introduced flashing lights. Moose stared at them, then fell asleep. The third released a robotic squirrel that darted erratically across the room. Moose erupted with joy, charging after it. When he caught it, he sat down and chewed one of its legs off. Vel slammed a clawed hand on the table. He destroyed our surveillance drone. Harlan glanced at Moose, who was now trying to bury the metal leg under a couch cushion. You made it look like a squirrel. What did you think would happen? The next trial was cancelled. That night, Harlan got a call. One of the Xilari guards had been walking alone when Moose slipped past a security door and tackled him in the hallway. The alien was unharmed physically but had filed a psychological trauma report. I'm sorry, Harlan muttered as he picked up Moose from the guard station. You can't keep jumping on people. Moose wagged his tail. The embassy installed a new policy. Moose was to wear a special vest that read friendly in both English and Xilari script. Harlan also attached a bell to his collar. The incident, while inconvenient, had an unexpected benefit. The Xilari started asking questions not about Moose, but about dogs in general. They were fascinated by the idea that humans had bred a predator into a companion. That we had selectively cultivated traits like loyalty, affection, and empathy over thousands of years. You reprogrammed a carnivorous species with kindness, Drick said one afternoon, watching Moose sunbathe on the embassy lawn. That is not a small feat. Harlan sat beside him. We didn't do it all at once. It took generations. And even now, some dogs are still. Well, not all of them are Moose. Drick tilted its head. I once believed your species to be reckless. But perhaps you are something else. Something persistent. Harlan chuckled. That's one word for it. There were still setbacks. When Moose chased the ambassador's robe, mistaking it for a tug toy, negotiations paused for 2 days. When he barked during a ceremonial silence, Harlan had to write a formal apology. But by the end of the Xilari's diplomatic stay, the fear had turned into curiosity. Some even asked if they could adopt dogs of their own. Maybe start with a goldfish, Harlan advised. Work your way up. On their final day, Drick approached Harlan with a small silver token to commemorate the first peaceful contact between our species and the beast that made it possible. Harlan smiled. His name's Moose. Drick nodded. May your people continue to teach us how to befriend our fears. Moose, sensing the moment, rolled over and offered his belly. Drick hesitated, then reached down and gave it a pat. Moose wagged his tail. The gesture was small, but it echoed louder than any speech. 3 days after the farewell ceremony, the Xilari requested a formal veterinary briefing. They framed it as a scientific exchange, but Harlan could read between the lines. Drick's message had been layered in diplomatic courtesy, but the subtext was clear. The council still wasn't entirely convinced Moose wouldn't abruptly shed his friendly exterior and reveal a more carnivorous core. Dr. Renata Ives, a vet from the UC Davis Comparative Medicine Program, was flown in. She arrived with 2 duffel bags of equipment, a portable ultrasound unit, and a demeanor best described as mildly over it. "I usually work with cheetahs and elephants," she muttered while setting up in the embassy's bio-observation room. "Now I'm here to explain a golden retriever to a bunch of space reptiles." Harlan glanced at the observation glass, behind which 7 Xilari officials stood in a line, each wearing a different kind of breathing mask. "They're still trying to figure out if Moose is a biological infiltration weapon." "That dog couldn't infiltrate a pillow fort," she said, snapping on gloves. "He drooled on my sleeve for 10 minutes. Moose, meanwhile, lay on an exam mat in the center of the room, tail thumping lazily. He was wearing a temporary harness outfitted with biometric sensors and a small camera, both of which he had tried to eat. Drick was among the observers, flanked by a Xilari behavioral biologist named Orla. The latter had brought a data pad larger than her torso and peered down at it with intense focus. Renata began with a stethoscope, pressing it against Moose's chest. Heart rate steady, no murmurs. Respiration within normal range. Orla tapped on her pad. "Does the creature possess redundant cardiac structures?" "Nope. Just one heart. Bigger than a cat's, smaller than a goat's." "Why does it pant?" "To regulate temperature." Drick leaned closer to the glass. "It ejects heat through the mouth?" "Dogs don't sweat like we do," Harlan said. "They cool off by panting. And through their paws, but mostly the panting." Orla's fingers paused midair. "It expels internal warmth via tongue flapping?" Renata didn't look up. "That's the technical term, yes. Tongue flapping." Moose yawned. The Xilari recoiled in synchronized alarm. Renata sighed. "That's not aggression. That's boredom." She continued with an abdominal ultrasound, applying gel and moving the probe with practiced ease. "Liver size normal. Kidneys symmetrical. No fluid accumulation." Orla scribbled frantically. "Does the creature store venom internally?" "Absolutely not." "Could it?" "No, what if provoked?" "I mean, he might pee on your shoes." Drick placed a hand against the glass. "Is that a threat display?" Harlan leaned closer. "No. That's just unfortunate." Moose sneezed, flinging a strand of drool across the room. It landed on Renata's sleeve. She didn't flinch. Orla reeled back. "It excretes enzymes through nasal expulsion?" "Just mucus," Renata said, wiping it off. "Standard upper respiratory function." Drick motioned to a technician who adjusted the translation bandwidth to a narrower frequency. "We have observed the beast's reaction to various stimuli, but we require data on its endurance. Its limits." Renata raised an eyebrow. "You want a stress test?" "Yes." "On a 10-year-old dog?" He demonstrated rapid movement previously. That was 30 seconds of jogging after a ball. It was enough to generate fear. Harlan pinched the bridge of his nose. "He's not a threat, he's just full of enthusiasm and carbs." Still, Renata agreed within reason. 15 minutes later, Moose was on a treadmill, tail wagging, tongue flopping, while Renata adjusted the incline. "Let's start slow," she said. 3 miles per hour. A Xilari engineer monitored the readings. "Its internal temperature is rising." "Expected," Renata said. "He's not overheating." After 4 minutes, Moose began to pant more heavily but kept walking. "Has the creature entered survival mode?" Orla asked. "No," Renata said. "This is a casual stroll." "Then why is it drooling more?" "Because he's a dog." At the 10-minute mark, Moose slowed and gave Renata a look of profound betrayal. Okay, she said, turning off the machine. "We're done." Moose stepped off with theatrical exhaustion and collapsed onto the floor. Orla watched with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Drick stepped through the decontamination arch and approached cautiously. "May I inquire about its recovery mechanism?" "He'll nap," Renata said. "That is your species regeneration protocol?" "For him?" "Absolutely." Harlan glanced at the readouts. "His vitals are fine. A little warm, but nothing abnormal." Drick crouched near Moose, who opened one eye and gave a half-hearted tail wag. "It shows no signs of vengeance." "Because he doesn't hold grudges," Harlan said. "He holds sticks and sometimes unfortunate sandwiches." Orla knelt beside Drick. "It responds to physical exertion with lethargy, not retaliation." "Curious." Renata packed away the equipment. "I can provide a full report, but to summarize, he's healthy, lazy, and not even remotely dangerous unless you're a dropped meatball." That night, a new request came through. The Xilari wished to observe human canine training exercises. Harlan arrived early the next morning with Moose and a duffel bag of supplies. The embassy courtyard had been cleared with a square perimeter marked by soft barriers. 10 Xilari observers stood around the edge, each assigned a specific behavioral metric. "All right, buddy," Harlan said, clipping a treat pouch to his belt. "Let's show them what obedience looks like." Moose sat patiently as Harlan gave the first command. "Stay." He stepped back 10 feet. Moose didn't move. "Down." Moose flopped onto his belly. "Roll over." Moose rolled. One of the Xilari gasped. "Good boy." Harlan tossed a treat, which Moose caught midair. Drick leaned toward Orla. He obeys without threat of punishment. It appears to be motivated by approval and food. Harlan ran through a few more commands: heel, sit, fetch. Moose performed with a sleepy but cooperative enthusiasm. Then came the final test, impulse control. Harlan placed a liver snack on the ground and told Moose to leave it. The dog stared at the treat. Drick whispered he will consume it. Moose whined. "Leave it," Harlan repeated. Moose looked up, eyes wide, and held position. 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. Finally, Harlan gave the release command. Moose devoured the treat in a single gulp. The aliens murmured among themselves. Orla stepped forward. "This creature demonstrates internal restraint. Does it understand morality?" "No," Harlan said. "He understands boundaries. There's a difference. Yet it chooses not to transgress. Because he trusts me." Drick tilted his head. "Trust is a volatile construct. Easily broken." "Not with dogs," Harlan said. "You treat them well, they stay loyal. You hurt them, they still try to forgive you." Orla's voice lowered. "That level of unconditional response is biologically inefficient." "Maybe," Harlan said. "But it's how they're wired." Later that afternoon, Harlan found himself in the embassy's garden again, Moose dozing under a patch of sunlight. Drick joined him, silent for a while. "When we first arrived," Drick said, "we assumed this planet was ruled by chaos. That your species had tamed nothing." Harlan ran a hand through Moose's fur. "We haven't tamed everything. But we try." Drick looked thoughtful. "You did not breed this creature for utility. Not for hunting or guarding or transport. You bred it for companionship." Harlan nodded. "That's right." Drick looked at Moose. "You engineered loyalty. You shaped affection. You sculpted gentleness. That is subversive." Moose shifted in his sleep and let out a soft snore. Drick stood. "We have much to reconsider." As the Xilari walked away, Moose cracked one eye open, stretched, and resumed snoring. Harlan leaned back against the bench, watching the alien disappear through the trellis of flowering vines. He reached down and scratched behind Moose's ear. "Well, buddy," he whispered, "you might have just saved the species." Again. Moose farted gently in response. Harlan winced. Heroism comes at a price. The embassy's botanical conservatory had never hosted a behavioral symposium before, but it had the highest ceiling clearance and enough reinforced seating for the Xilari's elongated spinal structures. The room smelled faintly of eucalyptus and warm soil, thanks to an indoor grove of non-flowering trees the Xilari had requested for neurological calm. Harlan adjusted the lapel of his borrowed jacket. His usual uniform still had liver treat residue in the pockets, and gave Moose a quick once-over. The dog sat beside him on a rubber mat, tongue lolling, a bright orange harness labeled Ambassadog strapped around his chest. Orla stood near the center dais, her posture upright, claws folded neatly in front of her. She gestured to the viewing platform where Harlan and Moose waited. "We have examined structure, response, and utility," she said to the gathered cohort. "Today we will assess integration." Harlan stepped forward. "Meaning?" Drick translated without hesitation. "They want to see if Moose can function in a cooperative task with Xilari participants." Harlan gave a slow nod. "You mean like a team-building exercise?" "Correct. One involving objectives, time constraints, and shared resources." "Does he get snacks at the end?" "That depends on performance." Moose sneezed and blinked at a nearby fern. Harlan turned to Orla. "What's the setup?" A small platform rose from the floor, revealing a low maze constructed of movable panels with colored symbols painted at each junction. A set of floating drones hovered above, projecting a translucent map that adjusted in real time. Orla pointed to the far end. The goal is to retrieve a beacon cube placed at the exit and return it to the starting point. The path includes false forks, reactive noise emitters, and overlapping scent trails. The human and the beast must coordinate with a Xilari navigator within the constraints of limited visual input and delayed audio communication. Harlan blinked. So, a maze with distractions, decoys, and lag? Precisely. And the point is to see if Moose can stay focused? Among other variables. Harlan crouched beside Moose. All right, buddy. It's like hide and seek, but with more bureaucracy. Drick stepped into the adjacent observation booth, headset in place, ready to relay instructions. The maze began to shift subtly, the panels adjusting angles and reshaping intersections. Begin, Orla announced. Harlan entered the maze with Moose at his side. The walls were just high enough to block peripheral vision, and the floor was textured with non-slip ridges. A soft hum vibrated underfoot, probably the scent dispersal system. Left fork, came Drick's voice through the earpiece, slightly delayed. Symbol is the coiled spiral. Harlan peered ahead. There were two paths, one marked with a spiral, the other with a triangle inside a square. All right, Moose. This way. The dog followed without hesitation, tail low but wagging slightly. As they turned the corner, a sudden burst of synthetic barking echoed from a hidden speaker. Moose paused, ears twitching, but didn't veer off. Good boy, Harlan murmured. Ignore the ghost dogs. After 3 more turns, they reached a fork where the floor glowed faintly blue. Moose sniffed the ground, then looked up at Harlan with a soft whine. What's the next symbol? Harlan asked. Wait, Drick said. Delay in signal. Interference. The lights flickered. Moose stepped backward, then sat abruptly. Come on, buddy. Just a little further. Moose didn't move. Harlan knelt. You okay? The dog's eyes were glassy, his breathing shallow. Harlan pressed 2 fingers gently to Moose's side, counting. Heart rate's up, he said aloud. He's overheating. Orla's voice cut through the ambient noise. The environment is temperature neutral for your species. Yeah, for me. Dogs don't sweat through their skin. This room's got no airflow and he's under stress. A pause, then what is the corrective measure? Harlan unclipped the harness, pulled off his jacket, and laid it on the floor. He coaxed Moose onto his side, propping his head slightly and pouring a small stream of water from his bottle onto the fur between his shoulder blades. This helps dissipate heat. He'll cool down in a few minutes. Drick's voice returned, quieter. Do we abort the task? Harlan looked at Moose, who thumped his tail once in response. Not yet. 5 minutes later, Moose was on his feet again, slower but alert. Harlan offered a piece of dried chicken from his pocket. Still with me. Moose wagged once. Drick resumed navigation. Next left. 2 turns, then right at the double half circle. They moved carefully, Harlan keeping one hand near Moose's collar. The next obstacle was a shallow pool of water covering the junction floor. Moose hesitated, then stepped gingerly through it, shaking off droplets after each step. Unfamiliar texture? Orla asked. He's not a fan of wet paws, Harlan replied. But he's adapting. Finally, they reached the beacon cube, a metallic object with a pulsing white light. Moose sniffed it, then barked once. Harlan picked it up and tied it to the harness. Let's get it back. The return path was shorter, the maze adjusting to form a direct corridor. As they exited, a soft chime sounded and the observation platform dimmed. Drick emerged first. Completion time, 16 minutes. No directional errors. Hesitation at obstacle 3, but successful recovery. Moose flopped onto the floor with a satisfied sigh. Harlan offered him the rest of the chicken. Orla approached slowly. The beast navigated complex variables, adapted to heat stress, and resisted misdirection. It prioritized task continuity without coercion. He just wanted to make me proud, Harlan said. That's the reward. Several Xilari behind her tapped notes into their hollow devices. One leaned forward. Would the creature perform similarly for a non-human? That depends on who's asking, Harlan said. Dogs bond through familiarity. Shared time, positive reinforcement. You can't download a shortcut for that. Drick crouched beside Moose, who rolled onto his back again, paws twitching. There are species in our archives deemed ungovernable, he said. We assumed yours was among them. Still might be, Harlan said. But we build bridges, even if they drool. Orla straightened. The review panel has reached consensus. Harlan raised an eyebrow. That was fast. We underestimated the cognitive pliability of your domesticated fauna. Their behavior reflects not just evolutionary shaping, but continuous trust modeling. So, Moose is cleared for full contact. No further restrictions. Moose chose this moment to sneeze directly onto Orla's leg. She blinked. We accept this gesture. Later that evening, long after the last of the observation drones had powered down, Harlan sat on a bench near the conservatory's western window. The dusklight filtered through the leaves, casting orange ripples on the floor. Drick joined him, holding a small ceramic bowl of water for Moose, who lapped at it gratefully. Will your species continue breeding for loyalty? Drick asked. We're not just breeding dogs, Harlan said. We're learning from them. Drick nodded. We once believed intelligence required dominance. Your companion demonstrates otherwise. Moose leaned his head on Harlan's knee, eyes content, breath slow. We thought you were the dangerous ones, Drick said. Harlan smiled. Sometimes we are, but not him. Drick stood. We will adjust our reports accordingly. As he walked away, Moose let out a low huff and curled into a ball. Harlan looked out the window, the last of the sun slipping behind the hills. Not bad for a creature who still thinks doorbells are sorcery, he whispered. Moose twitched once, then snored.